The Celestial Key. Astrology is the map for paradigm shifts, dimensional voyages, and psychedelic ascension. Introduction: the collapse of the consensus reality. A paradigm shift in the Kuhunian sense represents a fundamental transformation in the basic assumptions and frameworks within a scientific or cultural domain. When applied to individual consciousness, it signifies a profound and irreversible alteration in one's perception of reality, self, and cosmos. This essay posits that the ancient symbolic language of astrology provides a uniquely sophisticated map for understanding and navigating these seismic shifts in consciousness, particularly those induced by or analogous to psychedelic experiences, which often involve perceptions of alternate dimensions and states of ascension. By examining planetary archetypes, house systems, and critical placements, we can construct a hermeneutic for otherworldly states, viewing the birth chart not as a deterministic script, but as the architectural blueprint of the soul's journey through multiple layers of reality. The astrological paradigm, a universe of correspondence. Before we can map a shift, we must understand the territory. Astrology is fundamentally a system of correspondence built on the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, as within, so without. It posits that the macrocosm, the solar system, the galaxy, is reflected in the microcosm, the human psyche, earthly events. The planets are not causal agents, but symbolic correlates, archetypal forces of the collective unconscious, as Jung would argue. Saturn as the consensus reality. Saturn represents structure, limitation, time, and the ego. It is the architect of the prevailing paradigm, the ring past naught, that defines conventional reality. Its placement by sign, house, and aspect describes the specific nature of the societal and personal constraints one must initially accept, and ultimately transcend in a paradigm shift. Uranus as the paradigm shift. Uranus is the awakener, the revolutionary, the sudden flash of insight that shatters Saturnine structures. It governs breakthroughs, electricity, quantum leaps in understanding, and the perception of alternate possibilities. A strong Uranus, like prominent placement, hard aspects to personal planets in a chart, often signifies a soul destined to experience or instigate radical shifts in perspective. Neptune as the dissolution of boundaries. Neptune dissolves the Saturnine walls of separation. It is the realm of the mystical, the non-dual, the psychedelic, and the transcendent. It blurs the lines between self and other, reality and fantasy, connecting all things in a unified field of consciousness. It is the doorway to other dimensions, but also to confusion and illusion if not integrated properly. Pluto as the alchemical death and rebirth. Pluto governs the underworld journey, the death of the old self, and the subsequent regeneration. A true paradigm shift is not a gentle adjustment. It is a Plutonian ordeal, where the foundations of one's identity are torn asunder to be rebuilt on a more authentic level. It is the power behind deep, involuntary psychedelic journeys that strip the ego to its core. The architecture of consciousness, house systems, and theory. The house system one employs is not merely a technical preference, it is a philosophical stance on how consciousness is structured. The choice between Placidus, Holstein, Koch, or Porphyry changes the interpretation of where a planetary archetype manifests. The angular houses, 1st, 4th, 7th, 10th, the axes of incarnation. These houses represent the most immediate and tangible planes of existence. Planets here are potent and visible. A paradigm shift initiated by Uranus in the 10th house, career, public status, will play out very differently from one initiated in the 4th house, roots, subconscious foundations. The succedent houses, 2nd, 5th, 8th, 11th, the axes of resources and transformation. The 8th house is particularly critical. It is the natural house of Scorpio and Pluto, governing death, rebirth, shared resources, and the occult. It is the astrological correlate for the psychedelic experience itself, a journey into the shared unconscious, a confrontation with psychological shadow, and a transpersonal exchange of energy. A Neptune or Pluto placement here often signifies a native for whom otherworldly states and profound psychological depths are a central theme of life. The cadent houses, 3rd, 6th, 9th, 12th, the axes of mind and transcendence. The 9th house, the house of philosophy, higher mind, and expanded horizons. It is the quest for meaning, often through travel, study, or religion. This is the house of the seekers who are naturally drawn to paradigm-shifting ideas. The 12th house, the most Neptunian of houses, it is the realm of the unconscious, the collective karmic patterns, and ultimate transcendence. It is the cosmic womb, the void from which all form emerges and to which it returns. Planets in the 12th house represent energies that feel otherworldly, often accessed through solitude, meditation, or indeed psychedelics. This house is the direct astrological signature for the perception of alternate dimensions and the dissolution of the ego-bound self. Psychedelics as planetary triggers, the alchemy of ascension. Psychedelic substances can be understood as chemical keys that forcibly activate specific planetary archetypes within the individual's chart, effectively inducing a temporary, potent planetary transit. Uranian activation, psychedelics like LSD or DMT. These substances often produce a Uranian experience, a sudden jarring and lucid shattering of consensus reality. The user may perceive the geometric, electrical underpinnings of the universe, Uranus rules electricity and geometry, experience ego dissolution, and gain access to seemingly higher or alternate dimensions of information. This is a direct assault on the Saturnine structure of the ego. Neptunian activation, psychedelics like psilocybin, mescaline. These journeys are often softer, more mystical, and emotional. They produce a Neptunian dissolution of boundaries, a feeling of oceanic oneness with all life, and access to visionary symbolic realms. This is less a shattering and more a melting, a return to the source, the 12th house unity. Plutonian activation, high-dose or challenging experiences. The bad trip or the deeply confrontational journey is a pure Plutonian descent. It forces a confrontation with the shadow, with trauma, with fear, and with the process of death itself. This is not a pleasant shift, but an alchemical one where the base metal of the ego is subjected to immense pressure to be transmuted into gold. Ascension, in this context, is not a literal flight to heaven, but a symbolic process of achieving a higher order perspective. Astrologically, this is mapped by several factors. The lunar nodes, the south node represents karmic past and ingrained patterns, the north node, the soul's evolutionary destiny. A paradigm shift often involves a conscious turning from south node comforts toward north node growth. The sun-moon blend, the sun, conscious identity, and moon, unconscious emotional body, represent the primary duality of the self. Their relationship by aspect and the houses they rule describes the nature of the internal conflict that must be resolved for ascension or integration to occur. Transits and progressions. A paradigm shift is rarely random. It is often triggered by major transits, such as Uranus conjunct the natal sun, Pluto square the moon, or Saturn opposing its natal position, which creates the necessary tension and opportunity for fundamental change. Synthesizing the map, a case for dimensional consciousness. The perception of alternate dimensions during psychedelic states can be interpreted through the astrological model. If the natal chart is a 2D map of a multidimensional being, then the planets and signs represent the fundamental frequencies of consciousness, while the houses represent the dimensional planes in which these frequencies manifest. A transit of Neptune through one's third house, mundane mind, local environment, might not just cloud communication, but could open a perceptual doorway, a glitch in the matrix, where the everyday world is seen as illusory, revealing a more fluid, interconnected reality beneath. An individual with a heavily emphasized 8th, 12th house axis, example could be Pluto in the 8th, Neptune in the 12th, may have a natal chart configured to more readily perceive the layers of reality that these houses govern, the transpersonal unconscious, and the dimensions of life, death, and rebirth. Conclusion: the endless horizon. Astrology does not prove the objective reality of other dimensions or the efficacy of psychedelic ascension. Rather, it provides a profound, time-tested, and incredibly detailed symbolic language to contextualize and navigate these profound human experiences. It reframes the chaotic, often ineffable reports from the frontiers of consciousness into a coherent narrative of archetypal processes. The paradigm shift, then, is the moment when the individual's consciousness realigns from a Saturn-ruled literal interpretation of the chart as fate to a Uranian-Neptunian understanding of it as a dynamic, multidimensional map of the soul's potential. In this view, the birth chart becomes a mandala of transformation, and the planetary transits are not external forces acting upon us, but the celestial timing of our own inner unfoldment. The ultimate ascension, astrologically speaking, is the full realization and integration of all 12 houses, all 10 planets, and the entire zodiac within the self, a state of cosmic consciousness where the scene, and the celestial map are understood as one.